Rose Tate stood on the mercantile steps with a flour sack clutched to her ribs, while her own kin told the town she was not worth another supper. Her dress was patched, her cheeks still red from the wind and from words no decent man should let stand. Across the street, Cole Yardley leaned against a hitching rail in a coat too worn for a rich man. He had been pretending poverty so long that most folks looked through him. But when Rose lifted her chin and refused to cry, something in Cole's hardened heart answered. Then the banker laughed and called her an unwanted ranch girl with nothing but trouble in her pockets. Before we open the door to this dusty town, tell me your country in the comments. Subscribe if you love Western romances about public shame, unexpected rescue, and hearts that finally come home. By noon, every soul in Mercy Ridge had found a reason to look toward the mercantile. Some came for coffee beans, some for lamp oil, some for bolts of calico. But most came because disgrace had a way of drawing folks like buzzards over a dying steer. Rose Tate stood at the edge of the boardwalk, with one hand around a flour sack and the other pressed flat against her skirt pocket, where 3 nickels and a bent hairpin were the last things she could claim as her own. Inside the store, Mr. Haskell had already taken back the sugar she could not pay for. He had done it gently at first, then loudly when Amos Pike, the bank man, stepped close enough to hear. "Credit belongs to those with standing," Pike said, tapping his silver-tipped cane against the floorboards. "And Miss Tate has none left." Rose had not answered him. She had learned long ago that answering men like Amos Pike only gave them a bigger stage. She had lifted the flour sack and turned toward the door, hoping to leave before her shame grew legs, and followed her clear into the street. But then her cousin Lyle Tate arrived. He came in wearing a new gray coat bought from money that had once belonged to her father's ranch. Lyle was not handsome, but he carried himself like a man who believed a clean collar made him righteous. Beside him walked his mother, Aunt Verna, whose mouth looked always folded around a complaint. "There she is," Verna said, her voice sharp enough to cut thread. Taking what ain't hers again, Rose stopped on the threshold. Mr. Haskell looked at the flour sack in her arms. "She paid for that much?" "With what?" Lyle asked. "Buttons. Tears." A few men near the stove laughed. Rose felt the heat crawl up her neck. Outside, 2 boys quit rolling a wagon wheel and stared to the open door. A woman from church looked away, but not before Rose saw the pleased little brightness in her eyes. "My father's account still has a balance," Rose said quietly. Lyle's smile widened. "Your father's dead." The words landed harder than she expected, not because she had forgotten, but because the town had once lowered its hats when Silas Tate rode by. He had mended fences for widows, lent seed to desperate men, and opened his barn to travelers during blizzards. Now he was earth under a cedar cross, and the people he had helped were studying Rosa's patched hem as if poverty were a disease. "The Tate Ranch belongs to the family now," Lyle said. "Not to a girl who spent more time with calves and fence posts than with proper company. It was my home. It was a failing spread with debts under it." And Verna snapped, "You ought to be grateful we kept you this long." Rose swallowed. 3 weeks earlier, Verna had moved into the ranch house and begun sorting Rose's mother's quilts into trunks. 2 weeks earlier, Lyle had sold off 6 head of cattle without telling her. Yesterday, he had said there was no room for one more useless mouth. This morning, he had hitched the wagon at Rose to town under the pretense of buying supplies. Only after they arrived did he tell her he had arranged a place for her on the eastbound stage. "To where?" she had asked. "Anywhere that will take you." Now he stood in the mercantile, offering her disgrace in front of every person she had ever known. Rose looked past him at the bright square of doorway. Dust floated outside in sheets of pale gold. A poor man leaned against a hitching rail across the street, his hat low, his coat sun-faded, his boots worn at the heel. She had seen him around town these past months, mending tack for coins, sleeping sometimes in the livery loft, sometimes riding north where the land opened wide. Folks called him Cole Yardley, though they said his name with no weight behind it. He was watching, not with pity, not with hunger for gossip, just watching, steady and still, as if he saw the moment whole. Rose looked away first. "You cannot send me off like a stray dog," she said. "I can," Lyle answered, "and I will. Unless you can prove you own something worth keeping." Amos Pike chuckled. "The girl owns a flour sack." More laughter came then, low and mean. Rose's fingers tightened until the coarse cloth scratched her palm. She wanted to throw the flour at Pike's polished vest. She wanted to scream that her father had hidden something from men like him, that Silas had whispered about papers and water rights, and a survey map before fever took his voice. But whispering memories were not proof. She had searched her father's desk after the funeral and found nothing but unpaid notes and a brass button from his old coat. So she stood there, seen by everyone for the wrong reason. Not as Silas Tate's daughter, not as the girl who could rope a calf, birth a foal, ride fence through sleet and men, a broken gate with rawhide and prayer. They saw hunger. They saw a girl unwanted by her own blood. Lyle stepped closer. "The stage leaves at sundown. Be on it, or I'll have Sheriff Bell remove you from the ranch if you come back." "Sheriff Bell knows my father. Sheriff Bell knows a banknote when Pike shows it to him." Rose's mouth went dry, and Verna reached out and pinched the edge of Raza's sleeve between two fingers. "Look at you. No prospects, no dowry, no husband, no place. The kindest thing is to disappear before the town has to keep remembering what you lost." Something inside Rose went terribly quiet. She turned and walked out of the mercantile. Nobody stopped her. On the boardwalk, the sun struck her face. She heard the murmur behind her, the shifting boots, the little satisfied sigh of people relieved that trouble had walked away from them instead of toward them. She made it 3 steps before the flour sack tore. White flour spilled across the boards and down over her shoes like snow. The sound that left the watching crowd was almost one breath. Rose dropped to her knees and tried to gather what she could with both hands. That was when Cole Yardley crossed the street. Cole did not hurry. If he had hurried, the town would have made a spectacle of that too. Mercy Ridge was a place where mercy itself had to walk slow, or folks mistrusted it. He stepped up onto the boardwalk, removed his hat, and knelt beside Rose without looking at the crowd. "Wind's taking it," he said, as if they were discussing weather. Rose froze with her hands full of flour and dust. Cole took off his faded neckerchief and spread it flat on the boards. Then he used the edge of his hand to sweep the cleanest flour onto it. Not much, barely enough for biscuits if a woman stretched it with cornmeal. But he worked with such calm that Rose's trembling eased before she could stop it. "You needn't do that," she whispered. "I know." The answer confused her. Most help came with a hook in it. Pity, ownership, a sermon. Cole offered none of those. He tied the neckerchief by its corners and set the little bundle in her torn flour sack. Behind them, Amos Pike gave a soft laugh. "Careful, Yardley. Charity to a Tate girl might ruin your reputation, provided you had one." Cole stood. He was not tall in the grand way some men were, but he had the kind of height that seemed to come from stillness. His face was brown by wind, his jaw rough with a day's beard, and his eyes held a tired, gray caution. "I'm not particular about reputation," he said. "That is plain," Pike replied. A few men laughed again, weaker this time. Rose stood too quickly and nearly swayed. Cole's hand lifted as if to steady her, then stopped short of touching. She noticed that. The restraint, the respect of leaving her, balance her own. Cole looked at the torn sack. "I have needle and thread in my kit. You can mend that before the rest spills." "I have needle and thread. Then you're richer than most." For the first time that day, Rose almost smiled. It faded before it formed. Lyle came out of the mercantile with Aunt Verna behind him. "This ain't your quarrel, Yardley." "No," Cole said. "It's yours. That's why it smells so bad." The boardwalk went still. Lyle's face darkened. "You watch your mouth. Cole turned his hat slowly in his hands. I've been watching. Seems to me she came to buy flour, and you turned it into a hanging. She is family. That don't make the rope softer. Rose looked at him then. Really looked. Most men would have spoken big and loud, hoping admiration would follow. Cole spoke as if each word cost him, and he disliked spending. Aunt Verna sniffed. A drifting cowhand has no place judging decent people. Cole's gaze moved to her. Decency ain't a parlor chair, ma'am. It don't belong only to houses with curtains. Something shifted through the watchers. A woman lowered her eyes. Mr. Haskell pretended to arrange tins in the window. Sheriff Bell, standing near the post office, scratched his cheek and looked down the street as if he had not heard his own name dragged into the matter. Rose wanted to leave before Cole was punished for kindness. Men like Lyle could not bear being made small. Thank you, she said to Cole, but I can manage. Where are you headed? The question was quiet. It still struck like a hand on a bruise. Rose looked toward the hitching post where Lyle's wagon stood. Her trunk was not in it. Her shawl was still at the ranch. Her mother's Bible, her father's compass, every true thing left to her, remained behind walls where she was no longer welcome. I don't know, she admitted. The words cost her more than tears would have. Cole's eyes changed, not softened exactly, deepened. I've got a room behind the old blacksmith shed, he said. Not fit for much. Roof holds if the rain falls polite. There's a stove, if you don't mind smoke. You can take it for the night, Lyle laughed. Hear that, Rose? The poorest man in town offers you a palace. Rose's cheeks burned. Cole did not look at Lyle. I didn't offer a palace. I offered a door that shuts. That silenced her more than any grand rescue might have. A door that shuts. Rose had slept 3 nights with Aunt Verna, opening her bedroom door whenever she pleased, sorting drawers, counting dresses, taking inventory of grief. A door that shut sounded nearly holy. I have no money to pay, Rose said. I didn't ask for money. Then why? Cole's mouth tightened. For a moment he looked toward the North Hills, where the dry grass shone silver and the road ran thin. Because I once let a woman stand alone when I should be stepped forward sooner, he said. I don't aim to do it twice. The answer held a grief Rose did not understand. She nodded once. Only for tonight. For tonight, Cole agreed. As they walked away from the mercantile, nobody called after them. That was the town's way of pretending it had not participated. Cole kept half a step behind Rose, letting her choose the pace. The old blacksmith shed sat at the far edge of Mercy Ridge, where the last false fronts gave way to mule pens and open grass. Behind it stood a lean little room with weathered planks, a crooked stovepipe, and a single window looking toward the creek. It was poor. It was clean. A folded blanket lay on a narrow cot. A chip basin sat beside a bucket of water. 3 pieces of firewood were stacked near the stove. On a nail hung a small child's blue shawl, too delicate for a bachelor's room. Rose noticed it, but asked nothing. Cole set her flour sack on the table. I'll sleep in the livery. This is your room. I've slept in worse places than hay. Yes, so have I, Rose said. He glanced at her as if hearing something beneath the words. A soft cough came from the adjoining shed. Rose turned. Cole's face closed. That's Annie, my sister's little girl. She's staying there while I finish some work. A child sleeps in a blacksmith shed. His jaw tightened. She sleeps near me. The answer was defensive, and Rose saw in it both love and failure. Cole Yardley might offer shelter without humiliation, but he was not a man who easily let anyone question his choices. Rose walked to the door between the room and the shed. On a pile of folded horse blankets lay a girl of 6 or 7, pale-haired, small, and watching with solemn eyes. Her cheeks were flushed with fever. Rose looked back at Cole. She needs broth, Rose said, and a real bed. I know what she needs. No, Rose answered, quietly but firmly. You know how to keep her alive. That is not always the same. Cole stared at her. For a moment, she thought he might take back his offer. Instead, he looked toward Annie, then at the cot, then at Rose. "Can you cook broth? If you can find a chicken, I can find one." Without stealing, his eyes narrowed. Rose held his gaze. After a long second, his mouth moved as if he might laugh, but he did not. Without stealing, that evening, Cole brought a thin hen, 2 carrots, and a packet of salt wrapped in paper. Rose did not ask how he paid. She built the fire, cleaned the kettle, and made broth while Annie watched from the cot now placed near the stove. When the child slept, Cole stood in the doorway, with his hat in his hands. "You made this place warmer," he said. "It was not hard." "That ain't what I meant." Rose looked into the kettle and said nothing. Outside, Mercy Ridge settled under a red sky. In town, people would be telling the story their own way. An unwanted ranch girl taken in by a poor cow hand. Shame piled on shame. But inside the little room, Annie breathed easier. The stove gave off a steady heat. Cole sat by the door, like a guard who did not trust the world, and Rose, with flour dust still in the seams of her dress, felt for the first time all day that she had not disappeared. Morning came cold enough to silver the creek grass. Rose woke before the sun and lay still, listening. Annie slept on the cot, one hand curled under her cheek. Cole was outside splitting wood with slow, careful strokes. Each fall of the axe sounded measured, not showy. A man working because work must be done, not because anyone watched. Rose rose quietly, washed at the basin, and braided her hair. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she ignored it. Hunger had been her companion long enough that she knew its manners. On the table, beside the flour sack she had mended with tiny neat stitches, lay a folded paper. "You can use what is in the crate by the wall. I will replace it." The note was written in a firm hand, cleaner than she expected from a drifting cowhand. Not schoolhouse proud, but educated. Rose traced one letter with her fingertip, frowning. The crate held cornmeal, beans, coffee, onions, and a small jar of peach preserves. Too much. A poor man did not keep such stores, or if he did not leave them freely to a stranger. When Cole came in with an armful of wood, Rose was stirring cornmeal mush. "You should have woken me," he said. "You were busy. You're a guest. I am not suited to being one." Annie stirred on the cot. "Eyes there. Peaches." Rose looked at the jar, then at Cole. His expression warned against extravagance. The child's eyes pleaded against loneliness. "There can be," Rose said, and spooned one bright ribbon of preserves into Annie's bowl. Cole looked pained. Rose set a plain bowl before him. Children remember sweetness longer than hunger. Something passed over his face. "My sister used to say things like that," he said. "Annie's mother?" Cole nodded once. Rose waited. He did not continue. She had already learned that Cole's grief was fenced and posted. After breakfast, he took his hat from the nail. "I have worked north of town. You and Annie stay here." Rose's spine stiffened. "I am not hiding. Mercy Ridge is full of teeth today. It had teeth yesterday. And you bled enough." She set down the spoon. "Do not speak to me like I am a broken thing." Cole's eyes cooled. "I offered shelter, not orders. You just gave one." The room went silent. Annie looked between them. Cole's jaw worked. Then he lowered his gaze first. "You're right." Rose had expected argument, not surrender. It unsettled her more than anger would have. "I need work," she said. "If I stay in your room and eat your stores, I become what they said I was. You owe me nothing. That might comfort you." "It does not comfort me." Cole studied her for a long moment. "Can you handle stock?" "I was born in a calving shed." "Can you mend harness?" "Aye. The leather is not rotted clean through." "Can you read brands?" "Better than most men who claim they can." A faint respect entered his eyes. "There's a little spread 3 miles west. Belongs to a widow named Mrs. Bellwether. Fences down, goats scattered, barn roof poor. I told her I'd see to it, but Annie's fever held me up. I can go. I take you. I can ride." "I didn't say you couldn't." She almost bristled. then saw the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, a hint of one, hidden like a coin in dust. Cole borrowed a dun mare from the livery, or so he claimed. Rose noticed the hostler handed him the reins without asking for money. She noticed, too, that the mare was better bred than anything a poor cowhand ought to be trusted with. She said nothing. Mercy Ridge watched as they rode out. Lyle Tate stood outside the bank beside Amos Pike. Aunt Verna had her face turned toward the church ladies, already feeding them sorrow, dressed as virtue. Rose kept her chin high. Cole rode beside her. Not ahead. That, too, she noticed. Mrs. Bellwether's place sat in a fold of land where cottonwoods leaned over a muddy creek. The widow was small and bent, with hands knotted by work. She greeted Cole with relief, and Rose with a cautious glance that softened when Rose stepped down and immediately caught a loose gate before it fell. For 6 hours they worked. Cole repaired posts and reset wire. Rose gathered goats, cleaned the milking stall, patched harness, and climbed halfway up the barn ladder before Cole barked her name. She looked down. What? That ladder's split. I see it. Then climbed down. The roof hole is up here, and the ground is down here, waiting to break you. Rose almost smiled at the irritation in his voice. Are you always so cheerful when helping widows? Only when stubborn women test rotten ladders. She came down, though not because he ordered it, because she saw his hand flex at his side and understood he had already imagined her falling. They patched the roof together from inside, standing on grain barrels. At one point, a barrel shifted under Rose's boot. Cole caught her by the waist. For one breath, they were still. His hand was warm through the thin cotton of her dress. Her palm rested against his shoulder. He smelled of cedar smoke, leather, and cold air. His face was close enough for her to see a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Then he released her and stepped back as if burned. Careful, he said. I was. Be more. The words were rough, but his eyes were not. At dusk, Mrs. Bellwether paid them with eggs, a slab of bacon, and 2 jars of blackberry jam. Cole tried to refuse half. Rose accepted all with a firm thank you. Pride does not fry well, she told him as they rode back. Cole glanced at the basket in her lap. You have an answer for everything? No, only for foolishness. That a fact. It has been my experience. For the first time, Cole Yardley truly smiled. It changed his whole face. Rose looked quickly toward the road. Back at the shed, Annie's fever had eased. Rose cooked bacon with beans, and the smell filled the room so richly that even Cole seemed less haunted for a while. Annie sat wrapped in the blue shawl, asking Rose questions about goats, calves, and whether ranch girls could shoot snakes. Only if the snake starts the quarrel, Rose said. Cole huffed softly into his coffee. After Annie slept, Rose washed the dishes while Cole mended a bridle. A stone pressed against the windows, rattling the loose panes. I owe you wages, Cole said. You owe me nothing until you are paid. I was paid, with bacon and eggs. That counts. Then I took half my wages already by eating supper. He set the bridle down. You make it hard to help you. Rose dried a plate. Perhaps you make it hard to be helped. The rain began. Cole's gaze lowered to the table. The lamplight showed the tiredness around his eyes. I had a wife promised once, he said suddenly. Rose still. Her name was Clara. She liked my name better when it came with bank drafts. When money drew trouble to my family, she chose the trouble. My sister paid for it. Annie lost her mother because I trusted a pretty promise and showed the wrong people what Yardley holdings were worth. Rose said nothing. The rain filled the silence. As though now you pretend to be poor, she said at last. His eyes snapped up. It was not a denial. Rose's heart struck once hard. Cole leaned back, face closed. You're guessing. I am observing. Then observe, careful. Some truths are dangerous. For whom? For anyone standing near me when men decide they want what I have. Rose thought of Amos Pike's cane, Lyle's clean gray coat, Aunt Verna's fingers sorting through her mother's quilts. I know something about that, she said. Cole looked at her then, and the sharpness left him. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Annie murmured in sleep. The little room seemed smaller, warmer, bound together by things neither of them had meant to confess. Rose reached into her skirt pocket and drew out the bent hairpin. Wrapped around it was a scrap of oilcloth she had carried since her father's death. She unfolded it and showed Cole the faded corner of a survey mark. "My father hid papers before he died," she said. "I found this torn piece under the floor, near his bed." Lyle searched the house after the funeral. He did not find the rest. Cole leaned closer, all tiredness gone from his eyes. On the scrap was drawn part of a creek lie, 3 initials and the words, "North Vein, not silver alone." Cole did not touch it. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "My father's last map, I think. He told me there was more under Tate land than debt." He tried to say where. Fever took him before he could finish. Cole looked toward the dark window. Rose folded the scrap again. "Lyle wants me gone before I can find it. And Pike holds the note on the ranch." "Ah, yes." Cole's voice dropped. "Then kindness won't be enough." Rose felt the truth of it settle between them. The storm beat harder on the roof. A poor room, a sick child, a hidden man, an unwanted girl with a torn map in her pocket, and somewhere in the land that had rejected her, a fortune waited under dust, stone, and lies. By Sunday, Mercy Ridge had turned Rose Tate into a cautionary tale. At church, the whispers began before the first hymn. Rose entered late with Annie's small hand in hers and Cole behind them, his hat turning slowly between his fingers. She wore her clean brown dress, mended where the sleeve had torn, with her hair braided smooth. She had washed Annie's shawl and tied it carefully at the child's throat. Still, the congregation looked at her as if mud clung to her hem. Aunt Verna sat in the second pew, stiff with satisfaction. Lyle sat beside her. Amos Pike occupied his usual place near the aisle, close enough to be seen by every person who owed him money. Rose guided Annie into the back pew. Cole remained standing until she sat, then lowered himself beside the aisle, like a man prepared to leave quickly or fight slowly. The sermon was on charity. Reverend Noah spoke of open hands, mercy, and the duty of Christian hearts. His eyes avoided the back pew so carefully that his avoidance became a finger pointing straight at it. After service, women gathered in small knots outside. Rose heard her name twice, not loudly. That would have required courage. Mrs. Clay, who had once borrowed Rosa's mother's mourning veil, approached with a tight smile. "Miss Tate," she said, "some of us are concerned about appearances." Rose looked at her. "Whose?" Mrs. Clay blinked. "A young woman living under the protection of an unmarried man," she continued, recovering. "Even a poor one, especially a poor one. It invites talk." Cole's shoulders stiffened. Rose laid one hand gently on Annie's shoulder. "A child was ill. I cooked broth, perhaps, but reputation is a fragile thing. Mine was broken before I reached his door." Mrs. Clay flushed. Aunt Verna approached then, her black gloves folded over a prayer book. "Rose, you might still choose decency. Lyle has arranged passage east. There is a respectable laundry in Topeka that takes girls with no family prospects." "I have family prospects," Rose said. "You have delusions." Lyle came up behind his mother. "The ranch will be sold by month's end. Pike says the debt is clear enough." "That debt is not clear," Rose said. "Father said there were papers." Lyle's face changed so slightly, most would have missed it. Cole did not. "What papers?" Lyle asked. "You know, I know grief makes women invent comfort." Rose stepped closer. "I know you searched his room before the grave dirt settled." A murmur passed through the churchyard. Lyle smiled, but anger tightened his mouth. "Careful, cousin. Accusing family in public makes you look unwell." Amos Pike tapped his cane against the church step. "This can be settled without ugly talk. Miss Tate, the bank will honor your father's memory by clearing his debt if you surrender any claim and leave the county quietly." Rose's breath caught. Cole's voice came low beside her. That sounds generous for a banker. Pike's eyes moved to him. Generosity is often mistaken by those unaccustomed to it. No, Cole said. It has a different smell. Several men shifted. Pike's face hardened. You would do well to remember your station, Yardley. Cole almost smiled. Folks keep telling me I have none. And yet, you interfere in matters of land, inheritance, and respectable families. Rose felt Cole change beside her, not visibly, but something in him went still the way air goes still before lightning. He said nothing. That silence troubled her. Since the storm, since the map scrap, she had begun to understand that Cole Yardley's poverty was a coat he could remove whenever he chose. But he did not remove it. Not at the mercantile, not at church, not even while Pike spoke to him like dirt. For the first time, anger rose in Rose, not toward the town, but toward Cole. After the churchyard emptied, they walked Annie back toward the blacksmith's shed. The child skipped ahead, feeling stronger. Cole carried the basket. Mrs. Bellwether had sent with bread, wrapped in a towel. Rose waited until Annie was out of hearing. Why do you let him speak to you that way? Cole glanced at her. Pike, all of them. Words don't bruise much. They bruise when people believe them. I stopped caring what people believe. No, Rose said. You stopped caring what they believe about you. That is not the same as courage. His eyes narrowed. She kept walking, though her heart beat fast. You hide behind poverty the way some men hide behind wealth. You think it keeps you safe from being used. It does it? Or does it let you watch cruelty without risking anything? Cole stopped. Rose stopped too. The road behind the church was empty, except for wind and the dry rattle of wheeze. You think I risked nothing? He asked. I think you risked a room, a chicken, and some talk. I am grateful. But if what you hinted is true, you have power you refuse to use. His face closed. Cole. Power gets people killed. So does refusing to stand before the bullet. The words struck him. She saw it. Cole looked away toward the cemetery hill. My sister died because men learned what I owned. They wanted contracts, land, rail rights. One of them thought marrying into my family would open the safe. When that failed, he tried pressure, fire, threats. My sister was in the wrong barn at the wrong time. Rose's anger softened, but did not vanish. I am sorry, she said, truly. But Annie is still living beside a forge, because you are afraid that her house will reveal you. His jaw tightened. You do not know the whole of it. No, but I know the child coughs when cold dust rises. I know you count each jar of preserves like sweetness is a sin. I know you watch every road, as if grief will ride back on it. And I know you are kind enough to help me, but frightened enough to stop short of saving yourself. Cole's face had gone pale under the sunbrown. Rose regretted the pain in his eyes, but not the truth. That evening, she returned alone to the Tate Ranch. She did not tell Cole. He would have forbidden it, and then she would have had to forgive neither of them. The ranch lay 5 miles south, tucked under a low ridge where redstone broke through bunchgrass. Rose approached on foot near sunset, keeping to the creek bed. She knew every windbreak, every rabbit path, every loose board in the back fence. The house looked wrong with Inverness, lace curtains in the windows. Rose slipped into the old smokehouse first. Nothing. Then the tack room. Lyle had sold her father's saddle. The empty peg hurt worse than she expected. In the barn, dust lay over everything. She climbed to the loft and felt along the beam where her father had once hidden Christmas licorice. Her fingers found mouse droppings, splinters, nothing. Voices came from below. Rose froze. Lyle entered the barn with Amos Pike. I told you, Lyle said. She has a scrap. I saw it in her hand weeks ago after Silas died. Then find the rest, Pike snapped. I searched. Search again. The surveyor died 2 years past. The claim means nothing without the full map. Pike's cane struck wood. You fool. It means everything if the north vein runs past the creek. It is not just silver. There is copper there. My bay more. Rail spur access makes it worth a fortune. Rose pressed a hand over her mouth. Pike continued, lower now. Yardley interests have been buying land all through this valley under other names. If that hidden vein is proved before I secure the Tate note, the ranch becomes the richest holding in the county. Yardley, Lyle asked. You mean that cowhand? Pike laughed. Not the scarecrow. The real Yardley money is back east and in Denver. Cattle, rail, mining supply. Men like that do not sleep behind blacksmith sheds. Rose closed her eyes. Coal. Below. Lyle kicked at something. What if Rose finds the map? Then she becomes a problem. She already is. Send her east. Send her east. Tonight if you can. If she won't go, make her look unstable. A woman with no home. Living with a drifter, making claims about hidden riches. No court will listen. Their footsteps moved toward the door. After they left, Rose stayed in the loft until dark. Then she climbed down with shaking legs. She almost missed the place because grief had taught her to look at what was gone. Her father's saddle peg was empty, but the wall behind it showed a square of wood newer than the rest. Rose pried at it with her hairpin until the board lifted. Inside lay a tin cylinder wrapped in oilcloth. Her hands trembled as she opened it. There was the map, full and clean. Her father's hand marked the creek line, the ridge, the north vein, and the old Spanish survey beneath Tateland. Folded with it was a deed, a surveyor's sworn statement, and a letter addressed to Rose. My girl, if men come smiling after I am gone, trust the land before you trust their mouse. Your mother's dowry bought the north parcel. It is yours, not mine to lose and not theirs to sell. There is wealth there, but I pray you value water, grass, and honest hands more. Fortune reveals men. Let it reveal you kindly. Rose folded the papers against her heart. A floorboard creaked behind her. She turned. Lyle stood in the barn doorway with a lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. For one long second, neither of them moved. Lyle's lantern threw his shadow high against the barn wall. The pistol in his hand looked too heavy for him, as if even violence sat awkwardly in his grip. Give me the papers, Rose. She backed toward the stall gate. No, you do not understand what they mean. I understand exactly what they mean. His face twisted. You think you can run a ranch, negotiate with mining men, fight Pike. You are a girl who smells of calves and smoke. I am Silas Tate's daughter. You are in my way. The words came out raw, stripped of family polish. Rose looked at him and saw not a monster, but a small man terrified of returning to smallness. Lyle had tasted authority for 3 weeks and already mistook it for birthright. You could still tell the truth, she said. He laughed once, bitterly. Truth? Truth is debt. Truth is my mother sewing cuffs by lamplight, while your father played generous with money he should have saved. Truth is me watching folks praise Silas Tate while we counted beans. My father helped you. My father died owing him. Rose's anger faltered. She had not known. Lyle stepped closer. Pike promised me a share, enough to buy respect, enough that no one ever looks through me again. You would take that from me. I would take what is mine. He raised the pistol. Rose's breath stopped. A horse screamed outside. Then the barn door burst wide. Cole Yardley entered with a shotgun held low in fury in his face like Rose had never seen. Behind him, Mrs. Bellwether's hired boy held the reins of 2 lathered horses. Cole's coat was open, his hair wind-tossed, and his eyes fixed on Lyle. Lower it, Cole said. Lyle swung the pistol toward him. Cole did not flinch. You'll miss with your hand shaking. I want. Rose clutched the papers tighter. Lyle's mouth worked. This is family business. Then you should be ashamed to conduct it at gunpoint. Cole stepped inside. His shotgun remained low, but the promise in him filled the barn. Lyle looked from Cole to Rose, then toward the open door as if measuring escape. A second rider arrived. Sheriff Bell came in breathing hard, suspenders crooked, face grim. Lyle put it down. You taking her side? I'm taking the side without a pistol pointed at a woman. Slowly, Lyle lowered the gun. Cole crossed to Rose, but did not touch her until she nodded. Then his hand closed briefly around her elbow, steady and warm. "How did you know?" she whispered. Annie woke and asked where you were. "I saw your tracks by the creek." Then Mrs. Bellwether's boy came saying Pike and Lyle rode out fast. "I found it," Rose said. "I know. No, Cole, I found all of it." She showed him the papers. His face changed as he read. In the lantern light, the hidden man became visible not because his clothes changed, but because his stillness did. He understood deeds, veins, surveys, rail access. He understood the worth of what lay in her hands, and he looked frightened for her. "Pike will not stop," he said. "Then neither can we." Sheriff Bell took Lyle's pistol. Pike rode back to town. Said he was bringing legal papers by morning. Cole's jaw tightened. "He'll bring men too." "What men?" Rose asked. "Men who sign away homes while widows are still crying. Men who call theft business." Lyle spat into the dust. "You talk mighty large for a drifter." Cole turned toward him. For months, he had let the insult pass. This time, it struck something that had already cracked open. "My name is Cole Yardley," he said. "Not Cole the drifter, not that poor cowhand. Cole Yardley of the Yardley Cattle and Rail Company, majority holder in the North Spur Line, owner of the Bar Y spread, 3 freight contracts, and half the grazing rights. Pike has been lying about for 2 years. The barn went silent. Even Sheriff Bell stared. Lyle's mouth fell open. "You." Cole's eyes remained cold. "Me." Rose should have felt shock. Instead, she felt a strange sorrow, not because he had wealth, but because he had lived so long disguised as less. Believing less was the only safe place. "Why now?" she asked softly. He looked at her. "Because you were right," he said. "I made a poor man's coat into a coward's wall." The words entered her gently, even in that hard room. By dawn, Mercy Ridge had gathered again. This time not at the Mercantile, but outside the bank. Amos Pike stood on the steps with 2 hired men, Lyle at his side, and a stack of papers in one hand. He had expected Rose to come frightened or not at all. She came in her brown dress with mud on the hem, and her father's map in her satchel. Cole came beside her wearing the same worn coat, but behind him rode 20 men from the Bar Y. Mrs. Bellwether in her buckboard, Sheriff Bell with a warrant folded in his pocket, and Annie wrapped warm between 2 blankets on the wagon seat. The town watched with open mouths. Pike's face paled only slightly. He recovered fast. "Miss Tate, this display is unnecessary." "So was yesterday," Rose said. Cole stepped forward. "The Tate note." Pike's eyes flicked over him. "Bank matters are private. Not when fraud is involved. And what authority do you claim?" Cole reached into his coat and handed him a sealed paper. Pike read the first line. His fingers tightened. Cole spoke so everyone could hear. "As of 6 this morning, Yardley Cattle and Rail purchased Haskell Banks, controlling debt from its Denver holders. That includes your operating line. You no longer have authority to seize the Tate Ranch." A sound moved through the crowd. Pike's smile died. "You cannot simply." "I can. I did." Cole's voice hardened. "I used the name you laughed at." Rose looked at him sharply. That was the sacrifice. Not merely money. He had revealed himself to every hungry eye in the county. The wall was gone. The danger he feared had a road to him now. Pike saw it too. His expression shifted from anger to calculation. Cole continued. "The Tate note will be examined by Judge Harrow. So will your attempt to force Miss Tate from the county, while concealing mineral knowledge tied to her mother's parcel." Pike turned toward the crowd. "This is theater." Rose stepped onto the bank stairs. Her knees trembled, but she did not step down. She drew out her father's map and the deed. "My father was not a fool," she said. "My mother's dowry bought the north parcel. It was placed in trust for me. The creek, the ridge, and the vein beneath it belonged to that parcel. Lyle knew enough to fear it. Mr. Pike knew enough to steal it. Aunt Verna pushed through the crowd, face gray. Rose, do not shame the family. Rose looked at her. You brought my shame to the mercantile and called the town to watch. I'm only bringing truth to the same street. A woman gasped. Rose's voice shook but held. I was hungry, and you laughed. I was homeless, and you whispered. I was poor in your eyes, so you thought I could be moved like broken furniture. But my worth was never in the bank, not when I had nothing, and not now that there might be fortune under my feet. Silence followed. Then Mrs. Bellwether climbed down from her buckboard. She was old, bent, and moved slowly, but every eye turned to her. Silas Tate fixed my roof 3 winters past and would not take pay, she said. His girl fixed it again this week and took eggs like honest wages. I say she is worth more than the men who mocked her. Mr. Haskell removed his apron. I should have spoken at the store. Yes, Rose said. He bowed his head. I am sorry. One by one, not all, but enough. Faces changed. Pike tried to leave by the side steps. Sheriff Bell stopped him. Lyle stood alone, his gray coat suddenly looking borrowed from a better man. Rose looked at him, and for a moment she remembered 2 children chasing grasshoppers along the creek before debt and envy and hunger had bent him crooked. I will not send you to prison if the judge allows mercy, she said, but you will sign a statement. You will leave my house, and you will never again call theft family. Lyle's eyes filled with something too bitter to be tears. He looked away. Cole came up the steps beside Rose. He did not take her hand, not yet, but he stood close enough that no one could mistake where he had chosen to stand. Pike, stripped of his cane and papers, glared at him. You think this makes you noble, Yardley? You hid among poor men and judged us. Cole's face tightened. Rose glanced at him, wondering if he would answer with pride. He did not. No, Cole said. I hid because I was afraid. I judged some, misjudged others, but she had the courage to stand in public with nothing. I only found mine after watching her. The confession moved through the crowd more deeply than any boast could have. Rose looked at Cole and saw the man beneath both disguises, the poor coat and the rich name. A wounded man, imperfect, afraid, but willing now to be seen. And for the first time, she wondered whether home might be something rebuilt, not only from land, but from truth. The judge came from Abilene 10 days later. By then, Mercy Rich had learned to speak Rose Tate's name carefully. Some spoke it with respect because the map had been verified and the North Vein proved real. Some spoke it with regret because regret cost less than courage. Some spoke it with fresh calculation, which Rose recognized quickly enough to keep her doors closed to sudden friends. The Tate Ranch was hers, not free of trouble. Fortune never came clean. Men arrived with offers written in sharp ink. Mining agents praised her intelligence while trying to purchase her ignorance. Lawyers sent letters. Distant kin appeared like flies after Ray. But Rose was no longer alone at the table. Cole sat with her through each meeting, not speaking over her, not deciding for her, only answering when she asked and watching every clause with the eye of a man who had learned money could be a weapon or a shelter, depending on the hand that held it. The first thing Rose did was refuse to sell the whole ranch. The land fed us before it glittered, she told the judge. I will not strip it bare to prove I am rich. The judge, old and tired and impressed, despite himself, approved a lease that protected the creek, limited digging, and placed a portion of profits into trust for school, road, and widow relief in Mercy Rich. When Cole read that part, he looked at her for a long time. You heard your father, he said. I heard my mother too, Rose answered. She always said a full pantry should make a longer table, not a taller fence. Cole looked down at the contract. I spent years building taller fences. You had reasons. Reasons can become excuses if you polish them long enough. Rose smiled faintly. That sounds like something I would say. It did pain me some. She laughed softly, and the sound surprised them both. Annie moved into the ranch house before Cole did. That was Rose's insistence. The child needed sunlight, clean blankets, milk each morning, and a room whose walls did not smell of coal and old iron. Cole resisted for half a day, wearing that stubborn, wounded look Rose had come to know. Then Annie coughed once in the blacksmith shed. He packed her trunk himself. At the ranch, Rose gave Annie the small east room where morning light came through lace curtains that had belonged to Rose's mother. Annie stood in the doorway holding her rag doll, solemn as a judge. "Is this for me?" "For as long as you need it," Rose said. Annie touched the quilt. "Uncle Cole says kneading is dangerous." Rose glanced toward the hallway, where Cole stood very still. "Sometimes," Rose said gently, "but not when the people you need are kind." Annie considered that. "Are you kind?" "I try to be." The child nodded. "Then I need you some." Cole turned away, but not before Rose saw him press his fingers to his eyes. Spring moved slowly over the valley. Grass returned first in pale green threads, then bluebonnets along the creek, then calves unsteady and wet, blinking into a world that did not know yet whether it would be gentle. Rose worked the ranch with hired hands paid fair and fed well. Mrs. Bellwether took charge of the kitchen twice a week, claiming she only came to criticize the biscuits. Mr. Haskell delivered supplies himself, and never once mentioned credit. Sheriff Bell rode out with court papers clearing the Tate title and an apology he had practiced so poorly that Rose accepted it out of mercy. And Verna left for her sister's house in Missouri. Lyle signed his statement and took work with a freight outfit west of Dodge. Before he left, he came to the ranch at dusk. Cole saw him from the barn and reached for his rifle, but Rose shook her head. Lyle stood at the gate, hat in hand. "I hated your father because he made goodness look easy," he said. Rose did not answer. "It wasn't easy for us. I know that now. I still did wrong." Eyes. He looked at the house, the warm windows, the smoke rising from the chimney. "Will you be like him?" Rose thought of her father's letter. "Fortune reveals men. Let it reveal you kindly." "I will be like myself," she said. "I hope that is enough." Lyle nodded. He did not ask forgiveness. She was grateful for that. Some deaths deserve time. After he left, Cole came to stand beside her. "You all right?" "No." He accepted the answer. That was one of the things she loved about him, though she had not said the word aloud. Cole did not rush pain away because it made him uncomfortable. He had learned to sit beside it, awkwardly perhaps, but faithfully. Weeks passed before the town held the dedication. Rose had given money for a new schoolroom and a public well near the church, where no widow or orphan would be charged for water. The dedication drew nearly everyone in Mercy Ridge. Bunting hung from the mercantile awning. Children wore stiff collars. Reverend Moss prayed with more humility than he had preached that Sunday. Mrs. Clay brought a cake and could not meet Rose's eyes until Rose thanked her plainly. The new well stood in the center of town, built of pale stone from the Tate Ridge. Rose arrived in a blue dress made from cloth she had bought with her own money, though she had chosen the simplest pattern. She wore her mother's small pearl comb in her hair. Annie walked beside her, carrying a tin cup tied with ribbon. Cole arrived from the livery, still in his worn coat. Rose stopped when she saw it. "You own better," she said. "I do." "Then why wear that?" He looked down at the faded sleeves. "I thought folks ought to remember." "Remember what?" "That I was wrong." Rose studied him. "Wear it today, then put it away. You do not have to keep dressing as your penance." His eyes met hers. Around them, the town moved and murmured. "And what should I dress as?" "I ask a man who has come home to himself." Cole's throat moved. Before he could answer, Reverend Moss called Rose forward. She stood before the well, facing the same street where her flour had spilled. The mercantile steps were scrubbed clean. Amos Pike was gone, awaiting trial in another county for fraud tied to 3 banks. The men who had laughed by the stove stood hat in hand now, some from shame, some because fortune had taught them manners. Rose did not need to know which was which. She placed her hand on the stone. "My father believed water should not be hoarded from the thirsty, she said. My mother believed a home was proven by who found warmth there. This well is given in their memory, and for every person in Mercy Ridge who might one day stand hungry, ashamed, or alone, and need the town to be better than it was. Her voice trembled only at the end. Annie lifted the tin cup. First drink goes to Rose. A soft laugh moved through the crowd, tender and brief. Rose pumped water into the cup. Annie drank, then offered it to Cole. He drank after her and handed it back to Rose. Their fingers touched. The town was watching. Rose felt the old instinct rise, the need to step back before whispers found her. Cole felt it too. She saw it in the way his hand hesitated, asking without words. This time, she did not pull away. Cole took her hand in the middle of Mercy Ridge, not hidden in a poor room, not offered in secret beside a storm-dark window, not guarded by fear, debt, or shame, held in public. And Verna was gone. Pike was gone. Lyle was gone. But even if they had stood there, Rose knew she would not have let go. Cole looked down at their joined hands, then at her. I have loved you poorly, he said quietly. You have not said you love me at all. I was afraid saying it would make it something men could steal. And now, his tongue moved gently over her knuckles. Now I think not saying it is the theft. Rose's eyes filled, but she smiled. Then, say it plain. Cole Yardley. He removed his hat. In front of the well, the mercantile, the church ladies, the ranch hands, the children, and every memory that had once shamed her. Cole spoke with a steady voice. I love you, Rose Tate, not because of the fortune under your land, not because you stood when others would have fallen. I love you because you make a man answer for the life he is living, and still leave him room to become better. Rose held his hand tighter. I love you too, she said, but I will not be managed. One corner of his mouth lifted. I have noticed, and Annie stays close. She would mutiny otherwise, and the ranch remains the ranch, always. Then you might court me properly. Cole's smile deepened, slow and real. Might I start by walking you home? Rose looked toward the road south, where the Tate land waited under spring light. The ranch house would be warm by evening. Annie would fall asleep over her reader. Mrs. Bellwether would complain about the stove while secretly improving supper. Calves would call from the pasture. The creek would run over stone that had nearly been stolen, and was now held in trust by a woman once called Unwanted. Yes, Rose said, but not behind me. Cole offered his arm. She took it. They walked through Mercy Ridge side by side, past the mercantile steps where flour had once spilled like shame, past the churchyard where whispers had risen, past the bank where truth had stood its ground. People stepped aside, not for wealth alone, but for something harder, one, honor. At the edge of town, Annie ran ahead and turned back, with both arms waving. Come on, home is waiting. Rose laughed then, freely, and Cole looked at her as if the sound itself were the fortune he had never known how to seek. The sun lowered over the hills. The road glowed. Their hands found each other again without hesitation, and together, with the town behind them and the warm ranch lights ahead, Rose Tate and Cole Yardley walked home.